Want to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the continued support. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished listening to Red Seas Under Red Skies by Scott Lynch. This is the second book in the Gentleman Bastard series, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts upon finishing this book, which was just right now. So, this book's incredible. This is absolutely, from the bottom of my heart, I couldn't be happier with what I just listened to. And this is not my first time listening to this book. I listened to this originally 2 or 3 years ago when I was first getting back into reading and listening to fantasy books. And I gave it originally a 4.5 out of 5. And now I have to upgrade that to a 5 out of 5. In fact, I honestly think, just, gun to my head, what do I think about this book compared to the first one? I think I liked the second one a little bit more than the first one, the 𝐒𝐭𝐳 𝐒𝐿𝐼, on this second read-through. And I love the first one. I loved the first one when I first read it. I love the first one when I just got done reading it a month or two ago. I'm doing this reread of them. I'm trying to go through and do some rereads of the greats that I've listened to since before I had a booktube channel, so I can go back and kind of get video reviews of the things that I've loved over time. And I think originally I gave this one a 4.5 because I didn't like it as much as the first one. And that was back when I didn't really know what I was doing when I was rating things. Maybe I still don't. But back then, it was hard for me to reconcile giving a book a 5 out of 5 if I knew that the same book by the same author in the same series was worse than a predecessor. I would give it a lower score. Now I don't do that. Now I can recognize that there's a huge scale within 5 out of 5s and 4 out of 5s and everything. Where something can be higher or lower on that. Just because one book is better or worse doesn't need a whole point or even a 0.5 taken off that score. So I read that first one again a couple months ago, and I loved it. And I said, I think I love this book maybe even a little bit more than I loved it the first time. I just found more things about it that I loved, and going back, I was just so looking forward to it. It was just such an enjoyable experience. And going to the second one, I was really curious if I would hold true to my 4.5 rating. And the reason I gave it a 4.5 was while I loved the book, I felt like the ending of the book, the last 100 or so pages, I felt was rushed. I felt out of place, and it felt like it didn't feel deserved, like the first book did. The first book I felt like had a truly perfect ending to it. And I just didn't feel like the same in the second. It just felt like it kind of came out of nowhere and tried to tie up things too quickly in a book that's, I don't know how many pages it is because I listened to this in audiobook, but it was extremely long. On the upper, 10-20% on length on any fantasy books that I've read. I'm guessing 700 or so pages. Maybe it's not actually that many pages, but it's certainly that. Maybe the type is small, but it's a very long book. But so it feels weird to say that it rushed it, but that made it even worse because you have this long book, and then for the last little part of it, for everything to kind of come together, felt too tight, too neat, didn't make sense for the story. Now, as I'm reading this the second time, I'm realizing a few things. One, I loved the beginning and middle more than I liked the first book, and significantly more than I liked the first book. And it's the characters now. And the story, which I'm going to get to in a minute, I just felt like was a more fun story. And I'm not reading these books to read like the peak of what literature has to offer in terms of, the perfect ability to convey themes and the like. I'm reading these books just to have fun. And the second book was more fun than the first one. And, it didn't need that slow buildup to try to teach you about these characters. We got right into the action. And going on with the next big heist that these friends have in store for them. And I kept waiting for that ending to hit, that I knew was going to hit, that I wasn't going to enjoy as much. And when it finally did hit, it did feel more earned. It felt more earned because I knew by then that I've already read the ending. I could see the pieces being set up the second time that I didn't see the first time. I missed the pieces being set up. And now that I know that they're there, it felt more earned. And even though they were set up in the first third of the book, and then you had this middle third, which did this new thing, but it was a fun thing that it did. And it didn't need to be completely cohesive in trying to tie up everything. It was just, we got kind of a break from the main heist to go do this new thing that was really fun, and then we went back to that thing. And that was really awesome. And everything else was there. The writing was top-notch in terms of what I view is great. The audiobook actor who is, I should have remembered the name before I recorded this video, but it's just incredible. When I read this, I thought it was, top 2 best audiobook narrators that I've ever listened to. The other one being the First Law narrator, who's Stephen Pacey, I think is his name. And I think this one's Michael Page. I could be wrong, but I think it's Michael Page. Now I have, I think there's 3 that kind of stand alone above the rest. The other one is the audiobook narrator for Dungeon Crawler Carl, and that's just on another level, as are these. But if you're looking for an amazing audiobook, this is in the stratosphere for how wonderful audiobook narration can be. If you want to try this out in an audiobook and you don't have an Audible account already, I'd super appreciate it if you would hit the promo code down below in the, what am I looking for here? Below the video and above the comments, whatever that may be, whatever that's called. I'm having a mind blank right now, but I have a link there for a promo code. It doesn't give you anything special. You can get a free book anyways if you sign up for Audible, but if you do it this way, then I get a little kickback for it, so I'd appreciate that. But definitely try out the Liza Lamora and then move straight into this one. So I have rambled on enough. Let me talk to you about what's going on in this plot. So in the first story, we are introduced to this group called the Gentlemen Bastards. They are kids or young adults who have trained to become the best thieves in the world. And we get this mix of a story where we're learning how these thieves came together. And then those are the flashback stories. And then we get these current world stories of the big heist that they're trying to pull together. That ended. And for whatever reason, I won't say why, the thieves had to leave town and they had to go somewhere else. So now they're in that somewhere else. And they're trying the new heist. And this new heist involves a huge, like the world's biggest casino, and they want to rob this casino dry. There's an enormous vault, the hardest ever vault to crack into, and they've got this crazy plan that the reader doesn't really know exactly how they're going to do it, because I don't know that they know exactly how they're going to do it. But they're slowly trying to gain trust of the person who owns the casino so that they can eventually break in and become insanely rich. That's the basic premise of the story. Now, things get wildly out of control pretty quickly. I won't say why, but as is the first story, it is not a clean heist. Everything goes wrong, and then everything goes wrong some more. And in part, when everything goes wrong, and I won't say why, but we get this long middle section of the book where the thieves have to become pirates. And it sounds crazy when I say that out loud. It makes sense for the story, but they become pirates, and they have to go on an adventure because somebody tells them that they have to. And I wish I could say more. I wish I could tell you why, because it's very ingenious, the reasons that they have to do this. But it all makes sense when you read the story. And it's just, you get this fun new story. And I love pirate ships. I love boats. I love seafaring stories. And when you mix a fantasy story with that, it's just, and I love this one too. So we get this huge story there, and then they finally go back and they wrap it up. You get to see actually what's going on. Everything kind of gets twisted for you, and it all kind of makes sense in the end, and it's just awesome. It's just a truly incredible heist story. But what really differentiates this book from the other one is the other one had these flashback stories. And while I did love the flashbacks, I loved going back in time to seeing the other one, it did feel jarring. And tons of cliffhangers, because you would get to this point in the story, and then you'd have to wait a chapter to get back to that point. I don't love that. Now, I loved each of the stories combined here. Maybe some like the current day more than the past, and some like the past more than the current day, and that would be less enjoyable for them. But because I love them both pretty equally, the only part that was hard for me was the fact that it had a bunch of cliffhangers, and I hate cliffhangers. Always have, always will. But this one didn't have that, because this story takes place in the current day. And you just get to go from point to point to point. No cliffhangers at any point. We just get a really long story going on what these characters are up to. I love that. I liked it more, that way of telling it, than I liked the first one. Now, as I go into the third book that I'm going to read in another couple months, it does go back to that flashback kind of setting, and I'm probably not going to love that. I gave the third book a 4 out of 5. And I can almost guarantee that I'm going to like it more than a 4 out of 5. Maybe 4.5, maybe 5. We'll see. But I'm already getting giddy just thinking about it, because at the end of the day, I love these characters. I love the characters so much that they could be told doing anything and I would enjoy it. I mean, there's a big portion of the first part of the book, maybe 100, 150 pages, where there is not a heist going on. The main character is, how should I say it, not himself. And it's kind of going through these mental health kind of things. And one of the characters is trying to get this other character out of that funk that he's in. That's what happens for a good part of the story. And I loved it because I love the character so much. And I love the way that that this author, Scott Lynch, he writes. It's very funny, not trying to be like outwardly laughing, but the way that he writes is very witty. I love the darker language that's used here. And I love the darker tone to the story. It's not like this grim, dark story, but it is a darker story with a lot of violence and a lot of darker themes to it that I thoroughly enjoyed. So, you know, even though not a lot was going on in parts of this book, I just loved it. So I am really looking forward to getting to this third book because I just know that I love these things that can't change. This author didn't suddenly become a bad author. You know, a lot of people don't love that third book because they thought it was a big decline. But when they say that, they're comparing it to the first two books, A, and B, they're saying that they don't love some of the directions the plot went. But when you love all the other parts about what makes a good story, you know, how could it be bad? And ultimately, for me, it really can't. But we'll see, especially when I compare it to the first two books. You know, in this world, and if you're watching this, you probably already know what the story's kind of about a little bit, at least the first one. And this book's been out for a while, so you probably read it already. But, you know, it's kind of a light magic. There's a little more magic elements in this one than the other one, because really the big magic here, there's two big things. You know, you've got these bonds magi, which are all powerful mages, that live in a certain part of the world, and they kind of piss one off in the first story, and it kind of wreaks havoc. I don't love that. I hate all-powerful things that have magic that you can't explain. It's a super soft magic system, and the only people that have the magic is these people that can do seemingly anything, and I don't love that. Now, they didn't really exist in the second book, and I really liked that. In fact, as I think about it, maybe that's partly what I like a lot more about this one than the other one, is you didn't have these moments where you're like, oh, God, that could never happen. You know, this is only happening because somebody is all-powerful, and it felt more earned on the things that went down in this. But the other part of the magic is alchemy, and people can take these, alchemists can put together magical properties into things and make them more powerful, you know, give sicknesses to people that are uncurable, break into things that you shouldn't be able to break into, things like that. But it's a little more light. It's not super involved. The world here is just incredible. It's so well crafted. I mean, going from the city that featured in the first story, it feels like a totally new world. And it really is. It's a completely different setting. We go to multiple different settings here. They feel so unique, so lived in. And I suck up this world building, and I just want more stories to be in this world so it can be fully fleshed out. I've talked about the writing, the characters. I think I've kind of hit all the basic points that make me love a story. It's all here. You know, the ending did feel like we did kind of jump into it. Knowing it was going to happen, you know, I was okay with it. It's not the greatest ending in the world, but I thought it was good and it fit the story, and it didn't make me love this book any less. So that's it. I love this book. I love this series. Go pick up Gentlemen Bastards. Do yourself a favor. Get this book on audiobook. It's amazing. Truly amazing. There's no reason that you should be reading this instead of listening to audiobook if you are into audiobooks at all. If you've already read this book in physical form, I encourage you to go check it out on audiobook. You'll get a totally different appreciation for the story. So I'm going to end there. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all of my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Darren, Gregory, Jonathan, My Book is Lit, Miranda's Bookshelf, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Angelo, Blair, Brock, Evan, Harry B, Jamie, Joe, Maria, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion.